Kerr and the team made it a huge success for everyone. At one point, we were getting 4 requests a day from customers and suppliers who wanted to visit our leadership center. By 1986, the physical overhaul of Crotonville had been completed. We had a new residence hall to go with our new classrooms. And most important, the people in the classrooms had really changed. They were more energetic and much more likely to ask challenging questions. In all, it took perhaps 10 years for most of our people to really get it. In the past decade, the pit has been filled with excited and engaged people. The faces are young and diverse. The questions are smart and challenging, for me and for them. Crotonville is now an energy center, powering the exchange of ideas. When all is said and done, teaching is what I try to do for a living. Truth is, I've always liked teaching. After getting my Ph.D., I even interviewed at a few universities. In my first days at GE, I regularly taught math to one of my technicians, Pete Jones. During lunch hour, we'd get together in my Pittsfield office. I knew he was smart, and I wanted him to go back to school. Pete would tell you I was an impatient teacher. Sometimes I'd throw chalk at him when he failed to understand the formulas I wrote on my office blackboard. Somehow it all worked. Pete left GE and got his degree, and later taught for 30 years in the Pittsfield school system. It was easy for me to get hooked on Crotonville. I spent an extraordinary amount of my time there. I was in the pit once or twice a month, for up to 4 hours at a time. Over the course of 21 years, I had the chance to connect directly with nearly 18,000 GE leaders. Going there always rejuvenated me. It was one of the favorite parts of my job. Whenever I went to Crotonville, I never lectured. I loved the wide-open exchanges. The students taught me as much as I taught them. I became a facilitator, helping everyone learn from one another. I had ideas that I brought to every class, and our exchanges enriched them. I wanted everyone to push back and challenge. For the last 10 years, they have. Before I showed up, I would sometimes send ahead a handwritten memo of what I expected to cover during a session. For our MDC, I typically asked them to think as a group about some issues. See below. I'll be talking about A, B, and C players. I'll be asking your thoughts about the differing characteristics of each, and want to engage you in a discussion about them. What are the major frustrations you deal with? That I can help with? What don't you like about a career in GE that you would like to see changed? Are you experiencing the quality initiative? How would you accelerate it in your area, your business, and the company? For our EDC program, I had a different set of issues. I asked them what they'd do if they were appointed CEO of GE tomorrow. What would you do in your first 30 days? Do you have a current vision of what to do? How would you go about developing one? Present your best shot at a vision. How would you go about selling the vision? What foundations would you build on? What current practices would you jettison? I'd also ask each person to be prepared to describe a leadership dilemma they faced in the past 12 months, such as a plant closing, a work transfer, a difficult firing, or the sale or purchase of a business. I'd bring my own experiences into the classroom to tee up these discussions. One favorite story involved a November meeting in 1997 I had with Boeing co-chairman Phil Condit. At the time, we were trying to win a $1 billion-plus contract to supply aircraft engines for Boeing's new long-range 777 jet. I had been the after-dinner speaker at Bill Gates's annual summit in Seattle. That night, I sought out Phil and asked him for a private lunch the next day. The GE and Boeing teams had been working long and hard on the engine selection for the long-range version of the 777. Phil was well briefed on the subject. I made a pitch on why our engine was right for the plane, and why GE was the right partner. Phil listened carefully, asked a few questions, and ended the conversation with some great news. "Let's leave this luncheon by saying you've got the deal," he said. "But you've got to make a promise to me. You won't tell your people they've got it. They will have to continue to negotiate in good faith." I agreed. Over the next 60 to 90 days, those negotiating the deal were calling me up, saying we had to give Boeing more price concessions and more help with the development. I was dying each time my guys called to tell me about their latest concessions. Yet there was no way I could let them know of my conversation with Phil. So they kept giving and giving. Finally, it came down to the last day, and we were getting one more squeeze from Boeing. I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the phone and called Phil. "Phil, I'm choking. I can't sit here any longer. I've got to break this commitment." "You've gone far enough," he replied. "Tell your team to say no. They've got the deal." Another dilemma I'd share was the decision to move the production of our refrigerators from Louisville, Kentucky, to Mexico in the late 1990s. The economics clearly favored the decision. On the other hand, the union had been incredibly helpful at the local and national levels in trying to make our U.S. facilities more competitive. From a pure business case, the numbers dictated the move. We had other operations in Louisville, and a national union leadership that was trying hard to work with us. In the end, we made the call to keep manufacturing a line of refrigerators there, saving roughly 900 jobs in Louisville. I told the class that the goodwill we gained from this decision would help us become more competitive in Louisville. Still, it was a real dilemma to go against the numbers. I'd tell those stories and others like them, involving everyone in the class in my ethical and leadership quandaries. Then, I'd call on someone I knew had just been in a tight spot to discuss their dilemma. The floodgates would open. These personal discussions were some of the richest moments we had at Crotonville. Everyone in the room left knowing they weren't alone in facing a tough call. In the first-level courses, I'd start off by asking each student to introduce him, or herself. I'd spend the first of 4 hours just doing this. I tried to strike a personal connection and get them talking for a minute. Then I'd listen to presentations on their likes and dislikes about the company, and what they would change if they were in my shoes. Crotonville also became an invaluable place to clarify any confusion our initiatives were creating in the organization. During our early globalization efforts, people were asking, "Do I have to have a global assignment to get ahead in GE?" "Of course not," I'd say, "but your chances are better if you have one. It's a growth experience for you and your family." When I was trying to drive our shift towards services, class participants inevitably asked, "Are we getting out of products?" You can't have services if you don't have great products. During the early phase of our Six Sigma quality program, people began asking, "Does everybody have to have Six Sigma black belt training to get ahead in GE?" "It would sure help," I replied. "It's another way to get out of the pile." And when we launched our e-business initiative in 1999, people asked whether they needed to have black belts anymore. Some of them were so eager to get into our digitization efforts that they didn't want to invest 2 years in Six Sigma training. I'd reply, "Six Sigma is fundamental education, another differentiator for you, like getting your undergraduate or graduate degrees. Digitization is just one tool, like reading or writing. Everyone will have it." After every class, I usually join the group for a drink in our recreation center before taking off for headquarters. 3 days later, I'd get a response on what the class thought on 3 questions. What did you find about the presentation that was constructive and clarifying? What did you find confusing and troublesome? What do you regard as your most important takeaway? The comments were helpful. In the early 1980s, many managers left confused and troubled. I took all the reviews seriously, trying to bring what I learned from their responses into the next class. I read every comment religiously. If someone signed their name to the comments, I'd sometimes drop them a quick note, especially if I'd created a misunderstanding. By the mid-1980s, the responses were showing more buy-in. After hearing the strategy and the vision, they said they understood it better. What they heard me say, however, often didn't jibe with what their bosses told them back home. Some of their managers had been prepping them for the session by saying that what they would hear was nonsense. Deep in the organization, pockets of resistance were still alive and well. By 1988, some 5,000 GE employees were going to Crotonville for various courses every year, yet I was still getting the same questions and comments over and over again. People were saying that the message and vision made sense, but they often added, "That's not the way it is back home." Damn it! After all this effort, the message still wasn't getting all the way through. Oh, nay afternoon in September of 1988, I left Crotonville frustrated as hell. I had just about had it. That day had produced a particularly good session. The people in class poured out their frustrations about trying to change their businesses. I knew we had to get the candor and passion out of the classroom and back into the workplace. On the helicopter ride back to Fairfield, Jim Bogman had to listen to me vent my frustrations. "Why can't we get the Crotonville openness everywhere?" I didn't let him answer the question. I knew what we had to do. We have to recreate the Crotonville pit all over the company. By the time we landed in Fairfield, we had the answer. We had sketched out an idea that when fully developed over the next few weeks would become a GE game changer called Workout. The Crotonville pit was working because people felt free to speak. While I was technically their boss, I had little or no impact on their personal careers, especially in the lower-level classes. We had to create an atmosphere like this in all the businesses. Obviously, we couldn't have the business leaders run these sessions because they would know everyone in the room. The dynamics would change, and openness would be more difficult. We came up with the idea of bringing in trained facilitators from the outside, mainly university professors who had no axe to grind. Workout was patterned after the traditional New England town meeting. Groups of 40 to 100 employees were invited to share their views on the business and the bureaucracy that got in their way, particularly approvals, reports, meetings, and measurements. Workout meant just what the words implied, taking unnecessary work out of the system. Toward this end, we expected every business to hold hundreds of workouts. This was going to be a massive program. A typical workout lasted 2 to 3 days. It started with a presentation by the manager who might issue a challenge or outline a broad agenda and then leave. Without the boss present and with a facilitator to grease the discussions, employees were asked to list problems, debate solutions, and be prepared to sell their ideas when the boss returned. The neutral outside facilitator, one of 24 academics drafted by Jim Bogman, made the exchanges between the employees and the manager go a lot easier. The real novelty here was that we insisted managers make on-the-spot decisions on each proposal. They were expected to give a yes or no decision on at least 75% of the ideas. If a decision couldn't be made on the spot, there was an agreed-upon date for a decision. No one could bury the proposals. As people saw their ideas getting instantly implemented, it became a true bureaucracy buster. I'll never forget attending one of the workout sessions in April 1990 inches our appliance business. Together with 30 employees, we were sitting in a conference room in Lexington, Kentucky, at a Holiday Inn. A union production worker was in the middle of a presentation on how to improve the manufacturing of refrigerator doors. He was describing a part of the process that occurred on the second floor of the assembly line. Suddenly, the chief steward of the plant jumped up to interrupt him. "That's BS, he said. "You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You've never been up there." He grabbed a magic marker and began scribbling on the easel in the front of the room. Before you knew it, he had taken over the presentation and had the answer. His solution was accepted immediately. It was absolutely mind-blowing to see two union guys arguing over a manufacturing process improvement. Imagine kids just out of college with shiny new degrees trying to fix this manufacturing process. They wouldn't have a chance. Here were the guys with experience, helping us fix things. Small wonder that people began to forget their roles. They started speaking up everywhere. Hundreds of stories like this one spread throughout the organization. By mid-1992, more than 200,000 GE employees had been involved in workouts. The rationale for the program could be summed up by the comment made by a middle-aged appliance worker. "For 25 years, he said, you've paid for my hands when you could have had my brain as, well, for nothing." Workout confirmed what we already knew, that the people closest to the work know it best. Almost every good thing that has happened in the company can be traced to the liberation of some business, some team, or an individual. Workout liberated many of them. From a simple idea hatched at Crotonville, Workout helped us to create a culture where everyone began playing a part, where everyone's ideas began to count, and where leaders led rather than controlled. They coached rather than preached, and they got better results. Ultimately, Crotonville became a boiling pot for learning. Our most valuable teachers there became the students themselves. Through their classwork and field studies, they taught the company's leaders and one another that there often was a better way. Crotonville became, in fact, our most important factory. And soon we would make it even more productive with an idea that would change the organization forever. 13. Boundaryless. Taking ideas to the bottom line. I was sitting on the beach under an umbrella in Barbados in December 1989 on a belated honeymoon with my second wife Jane. My year-in-advance schedule had kept us from having a typical honeymoon when we were married in April. Now we were having our romantic vacation at last, but as usual I ended up talking about work, not what you'd call pillow talk. Workout had become a huge success. We were kicking bureaucracy's butt with it. Ideas were flowing faster all over the company. I was groping for a way to describe this, something that might capture the whole organization and take idea sharing to the next level. I was testing out on Jane my idea of focusing the brain power of 300,000 plus people into every person's head. It would be like having a great dinner party with 8 bright guests all knowing something different. Think how much better everyone at the table would be if there was a way to transfer the best of their ideas into each guest. That's really what I was after. Sandy Lane in Barbados was a great place. I'd never experienced a Caribbean Christmas. It was different. Seeing Santa Claus pop out of a submarine while I was lying on the beach may have been just the jolt I needed. That day, I got the idea that would obsess me for the next decade. Poor Jane. I was on a roll. I kept talking about all the boundaries that workout was breaking down. Suddenly, the word boundaryless popped into my head. It really summed up my dream for the company. I couldn't get the word out of my mind. Silly as it sounds, it felt like a scientific breakthrough. A week later, all wound up with my newest obsession, I went directly from Barbados to our operating managers meeting in Boca Raton. Boca is the 2-day session that I always closed by outlining our challenges for the coming year. This time, the last 5 pages of scribbles were all about boundaryless behavior. I think the remarks sounded better than they were jotted down. See page below. As usual, I was a bit over the top. I had learned that for any big idea, you had to sell, and sell to move the needle at all. In my closing remarks, I called boundaryless the idea that will make the difference between GE and the rest of world business in the 1990s. I was not bashful about this vision. The boundaryless company I saw would remove all the barriers among the functions: engineering, manufacturing, marketing, and the rest. It would recognize no distinctions between domestic and foreign operations. It meant we'd be as comfortable doing business in Budapest and Seoul as we were in Louisville and Schenectady. A boundaryless company would knock down external walls, making suppliers and customers part of a single process. It would eliminate the less visible walls of race and gender. It would put the team ahead of individual ego. For our entire history, we had rewarded the inventor, or the person who came up with a good idea. Boundaryless would make heroes out of people who recognized and developed a good idea, not just those who came up with one. As a result, leaders were encouraged to share the credit for ideas with their teams, rather than take full credit themselves. It made a huge difference in how we all related to one another. Boundaryless would also open us up to the best ideas and practices from other companies. We had already made a dent in killing NIH, not invented here, by using ideas like Kanban manufacturing from Japan, a precursor to just-in-time inventory. Boundaryless was much broader. It would make each of us wake up with the goal of finding a better way every day. It was a phrase that became a slogan, put up on the walls of GE factories and offices around the world. The idea gave new momentum to the learning culture workout had started. By 1990, we were already getting some sharing across businesses. Boundaryless just gave us a word to express it and make it part of our everyday life. We ranted about it at every meeting. We'd use it to lightheartedly embarrass someone who wasn't sharing an idea or a manager who wouldn't give up a good employee to another business. Someone would joke, "That's real boundaryless behavior." They got the message. By 1991, in our Session C Human Resources Reviews, we began grading managers on their degree of boundaryless behavior. Every manager in the company was rated high, medium, or low based on their peers' evaluations, and later the views of their supervisors. An empty circle next to a person's name meant they had to change fast or leave. Everyone got feedback on where they stood on this value, and soon everyone knew how important this value had become. In 1992, at Boca again, I did something that made our values, including being boundaryless, really come to life. We discussed the different kinds of managers based on their ability to deliver numbers while maintaining GE values. I described 4 types of managers. The Type 1 manager delivers on commitments, financial or otherwise, and shares the values. His or her future is an easy call. Type 2 is one who doesn't meet commitments and doesn't share our values. Not as pleasant a call, but just as easy as Type 1. Type 3 misses commitments but shares all our values. We believed in giving them a second or perhaps third chance, preferably in a different environment. I've seen some real comebacks. Type 4 is the most difficult for all of us to deal with. That's the person who delivers on all the commitments, makes the numbers, but doesn't share the values, the manager who typically forces performance out of people, rather than inspires it. The autocrat, the tyrant. Too often, we've all looked the other way at these bullies. I know I have. Maybe in other times this was okay. But in an organization where boundaryless behavior was to become a defining value, we could not afford the Type 4 manager. In front of 500 people at Boca, without using names, I explained why 4 corporate officers were asked to leave during the prior year, even though they delivered good financial performance. When I wanted to make a point, I'd never use the traditional left for personal reasons excuse. "Look around you," I said. "There are 5 fewer officers here than there were last year. 1 was removed for the numbers, and 4 were asked to go because they didn't practice our values." I explained that 1 officer was removed because he wasn't a believer in workout or idea sharing. He didn't get what boundaryless meant. Another couldn't build a strong team, while a third officer wouldn't empower the team he had, and the fourth never got the idea of globalization. The reason for taking so much time on this is that it's important. We can't be talking about reality, candor, globalization, boundaryless speed and empowerment, and have people who don't embrace these values. Every one of us must walk the talk. You could hear a pin drop. When I used the lack of boundaryless behavior as one of the principal reasons for a manager's leaving, the idea really hit home. You could feel the audience thinking, "This is for real, they mean it." Suddenly, finding a better way every day wasn't just a slogan. It was the essence of boundaryless behavior, and it defined our expectations. After years of working on the hardware of GE, the restructuring, acquisitions and dispositions, boundaryless was at the heart of developing what we would later call the social architecture of the company. These were the core values of GE that would set us apart. We had to insist on excellence and be intolerant of bureaucracy. We had to search for and apply the best ideas regardless of their source. We had to prize global intellectual capital and the people who provided it. We had to be passionately focused on driving customer success. At the same time, over 5,000 employees worked at Crotonville over a 3-year period to hammer out a value statement. We considered those values so important that we put them on laminated cards that we all carry. In short, we wanted to create a learning culture that would make GE much more than the sum of its parts, so much more than a conglomerate. From my first day as CEO, I knew we were more than a portfolio of disconnected businesses. Early on, I came up with a term, integrated diversity, in an effort to communicate the advantage GE got from sharing ideas across businesses. That term didn't work. It was business-y. It wasn't personal or human enough. Amazing what a couple of words can or can't do. Of course, a word or a phrase wasn't enough. We had to back it up with a system that would make it happen. Primarily, we had to change how we paid our best. The prior system made the annual bonus the big reward. It was based on how your individual business performed. If you did well, even if the overall company did poorly, you got yours. I couldn't stand the idea of the company sinking and some businesses making it to shore. The compensation system didn't support the behavior I wanted. If we wanted every business to be a laboratory for ideas, we needed to pay people in a way that would reinforce the concept. Our compensation system was working against us. The day I was announced as chairman in 1980, I had options on 17,000 shares of GE stock and had realized gains of less than $80,000 after 12 years of getting option grants. Imagine how little the other officers had. If someone was making $200,000 in salary then, and their business unit had a great year, their bonus could be 25% of their base pay, or $50,000. The individual bonus far outweighed the value of the stock option grants. I wanted the overall company's results and stock price to mean more to people than the results of their individual businesses. I went to the board in September 1982 and got support to make a change. We increased the size and frequency of option grants. When the stock market cooperated in the early 1980s, people saw their gains from the company's performance overwhelm anything they ever got from their businesses. That reinforced idea sharing among the top 500 people. I should have done more, faster. It took me until 1989 to broaden the plan. In that year, instead of just 500 people, 3,000 of our best people got options. Today, 15,000 employees get them every year, and more than twice that number already have them. These changes in the option plan and a healthy stock market drove idea sharing. In 1981, the value of exercised options for everyone at GE was only $6 million. 4 years later, that number increased to $52 million. In 1997, 10,000 GE people cashed in options worth $1 billion. In 1999, about 15,000 employees got $2.1 billion from them. In 2000, about 32,000 employees held options worth over $12 billion. Holding stock in employee savings plans and stock options make GE employees the single largest shareholders in the company. What a kick! Every Friday I got a printout listing all the employees who exercised stock options and the size of their gains. The options were changing their lives, helping them put their kids through college, take care of elderly parents, or buy second homes. The most fun was spotting names I didn't know. It wasn't only fat cats. Boundaryless was paying off for everyone.